When you see this dish, what comes to mind? How about this one? Or this? Not to talk these dishes down, but chances are fancy and sophisticated don't come to mind. And these thoughts are what we most think of when we picture French food.
France is renowned for having the best cuisine in the world. If you want to become a god or goddess of gastronomy, this is the place to be.
This idea of French food is an idea. It's haute cuisine. And I think that most people who go to a French restaurant aren't going for a specific dish, but rather to experience this form of theater, this play of flavors, ingredients, and plating. I mean, the fact that it's hard for most people to even name some basic French dishes is kind of crazy to me, given that it's like, the #1 cuisine in the world.
C'est un choix très judicieux. Merci.
So this time, I want to map French cuisine and show you what regular people here eat on a normal basis. This cuisine happens to be one of the most diverse in Europe, and I'm not even talking about immigrant cuisines. From the cold and cloudy north to the warm and sunny south, France is as much of a puzzle of different cuisines as the ones I've mapped before. So let's look at French food in a way you might not have before. Let's look beyond restaurants, course meals, and the Michelin guide. Let's look at the diverse regional cuisines of the country of France. Just to be clear, in this video, I'm only going to talk about the French mainland. I'm clarifying this because there's a lot more of France around the world. But let's just stick to this part of France that we all know, basically the homeland. Beginning with the north, a place known with its colder and wetter climate. This region is in the crossroads of many cultures, and it often gets called the battlefield for all of Europe. It's been fought over by the Belgians, Romans, Franks, English, Germans, you name it. And many of these cultures have influenced the food here in northern France. For example, this region is the center of French beer production, and much of the beers in France are based off of German pilsners and lagers. But this region is also famous for champagne, which is, well, from Champagne. The north of France is also the largest sugar-producing region in the country, because in the 1800s, Britain imposed a naval blockade on Europe, which prevented France from receiving sugar from its colonies. To combat this, Napoleon pushed for research into local sugar beets, a plant grown on the continent, helping farmers to find ways to produce sugar in Europe. This led to the creation of the sugar pie, along with some other desserts here in northern France. Apart from other countries influencing the food here, the cold and damp climate also resulted in much of the food being hearty, with a lot of stews and soups, such as the French onion soup, or baking using butter and wheat. In Lorraine comes the earliest record we have of the quiche, from a hospice in the city of Nancy, which is why it's now commonly known as the quiche Lorraine. Near the German border is also home to the tarte flambée, which is a flatbread baked with white cheese, onions, and bacon. This part of the country is also the origin of the famous pastry madeleines. On the other side, in Brittany, is where the crepe comes from. A 13th century legend claims that crepe came from a housewife who accidentally spilled some porridge onto a hot flat stovetop. As people during that time never really wasted food, she decided to eat it, and the rest is history. By the way, there's no definite proof of this, but it is a nice story for, one of the most beloved dishes from France. It's not surprising that galettes are also from Brittany, which, in simplest form, is a savory sister to crepes. The main difference between them is that galettes are squares and crepes are triangles. The colder weather also gave way for beef to be the staple meat here. France's two famous steak dishes originate from here, one from the border with Belgium and one from Normandy. Apart from wheat and meat, stews are a big part of the cuisine in northern France, which leads to dishes like carrot soup, poté Lorraine, and this one from Brittany. Now, you might have noticed that I'm avoiding to say the names of some of these dishes because I'm terrible at pronouncing anything in a different language. Like I'm barely able to speak English already. And you guys very cheerfully point that out. I mean, I know it's not an off the menu video without me mispronouncing something, but as someone who's been to France a few times and loves the food there, I really want to try to put in more effort to really get my French phonetics right. Which is why I want to talk about the partner of today's video, Rosetta Stone. They're a major player among language learning softwares. And today I want to show you why Rosetta Stone is one of my main resources for practicing French. So when it comes to reading French, I actually can sometimes understand maybe 20 to 30% of it. I mean, I took Spanish for 3 years, so Spanish and French have some similarities, and also many English words come from French. But when it comes to speaking and listening, French is really hard for me. And that's where Rosetta Stone comes in. Rosetta Stone's lessons focus heavily on speaking and listening. The program uses true accent tech that compares your speech to a native speaker's and grades you on how close you are. And it can be pretty strict. Une pomme.
Une pomme.
And the other thing I like is that this app is very visual, forcing your brain to fill in the gaps through context. Rosetta Stone builds language learning around this model because it's basically how we learned our native languages as kids. We hear it around us, make connections through context, and practice it in real-world situations.
La fille mange du pain.
They've been around for like 30 years, and now they support 25 different languages. If you want to learn Swedish, Vietnamese, or Irish, Rosetta Stone has you covered. And if you click on the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen right now, you get a lifetime subscription for over 60% off. And a lifetime subscription means you get access forever for one discounted price. That lifetime subscription gives you access to all 25 languages they support. Basically, it's a great deal and a good time to start catching up on your Italian. But for me, it's a good start to try to stop sounding like an idiot whenever I try to use French. Alright, back to the video. Next, let's look at Central France, which encompasses a majority of the country. And we can't talk about French cuisine without talking about Paris. This iconic city is where the restaurant and cafe were born, and where the idea of French food as we know it really began. Not to mention, there's so many dishes from here. For example, the macaron as we know it today was created in Paris, thanks to this guy. But the macaron itself has a pretty international lineage, tracing all the way back to a Persian almond sweet, which was then brought over to Europe by Tunisians during the Islamic conquests in places like Spain and Sicily. Europeans would adapt these sweets into something more cookie-like. And this guy eventually came up with the idea to fill the cookies with a layer of cream or jam. Another popular food from Paris is the croissant in its modern form. I've already made a whole other video about croissants, where they came from, and why they're such an important symbol of France now, so you can watch that video instead. Baguettes also started popping up in Paris around the same time as the croissant, and in fact the father of the croissant also claims to have invented the baguette, but that's debated. Others say that Napoleon had it made as it was easier to carry into war, which would have been really French if true. Nobody knows for sure how the baguette came to be, but we do know that the name was coined in Paris sometime around the 1920s. Now, one of my favorite French dishes also comes from Paris, the croque monsieur. I don't speak French, I'm sorry. It's a ham sandwich with melted cheese on top of it, and it was invented in one of Paris's bistros by this guy, as a quick snack for busy Parisians in the 1910s. By the way, another ham sandwich also originates from here. Some other Parisian inventions include this, a sweet made to celebrate a bicycle race, brie cheese from a neighboring village, and la opera, a layer cake with coffee, ganache, and biscuits. Next door in Versailles also saw the birth or modernization of some of France's most famous dishes, including escargot and consommé, all thanks to this guy. Again, I made a whole other video about that guy. Another major region in central France is Burgundy. This place is famous for Burgundy wine, but also has many other dishes, from Dijon mustard, which gets its unique taste from using juice from unripe grapes, to beef bourguignon, a beef stew that is, of course, made with red Burgundy wine. There's also a similar chicken version of this. By the way, if you think escargots are weird because it's snails, this part of France is famous for fried frog legs, which has been eaten in the country for over 1,000 years, and is probably not a dish most associate with France. Nearby is another relatively unknown dish, the truffade, a cheese and potato pancake that comes from rural farmers. It's a perfect example of how France can just make something really good from almost nothing. The western part of central France is also home to Bordeaux, which is where the cannelle is from. Nobody knows who invented it, but it was traditionally made by nuns who gave them to the poor. Nowadays, they're usually eaten with champagne or wine in France. Western France has some other pretty unknown dishes, like this eel stew that's cooked in wine and its own blood, and this giant cookie that gives off Illuminati vibes. But let's finally move on to the southern coast of France, where we find ourselves in a starkly different looking country compared to the north. And despite being a region within France, the cuisine here is pretty diverse depending on where you are. There's the cassolette, a symbolic dish in Occitan, a traditional bean and meat dish that's cooked in a terracotta pot. This region is also home to the famous duck confit, which actually comes from a tradition of preserving meat by slow cooking and submerging it in its own fat to store it for long periods of time. But one dish that signifies its Mediterranean climate is this stuffed squid dish that uses breadcrumbs and butter. But honestly, the dominant region of southern France is probably Provence, which borders Italy. By the way, Italian food happens to be one of the biggest influences on modern French cuisine, and we can see that from a lot of dishes in the south of France, like this sandwich from Nice, made with anchovies and olive oil. Also from Nice is this tart, also with anchovies and olives, which looks a lot like a pizza. Around here, anchovies and olives happen to be pretty huge ingredients. A lot of the dishes here are often more so a crossover between traditional French and Italian flavors. This region is also home to ratatouille, originally made by poor farmers in the 1700s, using leftover vegetables that were going bad. Ratatouille was made by stewing these overripe vegetables for hours to bring out their flavors as if they were fresh all over again. Nearby Marseille also has a bunch of local dishes to boast, like this, a unique spread using black olives and anchovies, or this, which is cod in mashed potatoes mixed with olive oil, garlic, and milk. And there's also the calisson, which is an incredible sweet that's made with almonds and candied melon topped with icing. And there you have it, a very brief look into the diversity of French food. Like any other cuisine, it has incredibly homey food and amazing dishes that you can't always find in a typical French restaurant. But I hope that if you ever go to France, this video can sort of help give you a slightly better idea of what kind of food you can get wherever you are there. So I've already mapped a few other cuisines from around the world, and I want to keep doing this for other countries. So let me know in the comments to what other countries you want me to map through food. And who knows, it might get made. But yeah, for now, that's French food. So I recommend it.